I'm going to give you a brief overview about cold start problem. Hot tips on cold starts. So it's about time series forecasting, and I'm going to talk more about a specific application to demand forecasting in fashion. A very good example of this problem is a dataset Visuela 2, which is freely available. You can also download it and play if you want. It has around 3 years of sales time series for 5,000 products, and it contains product descriptions and images. Some of them you see on the screen. These are two examples of time series that we have in the data set. Let's imagine we are now here in June 2019, and we want to make a forecast for the future. Here we see two time series. One of them is classical, we have some historical past. So we can use this historical data to make a forecast in the future. And we have a cold case, where we don't have any history at all. It is obvious why it can be very useful to make forecasts in this case. For example, we can decide which products to launch, how much stock will we need, and how to advertise products, like which ones need more marketing. But how can we approach forecasting here? We don't have any data, right? Let's refer to a classical book about forecasting by Rob Heitman. And we find there that the only way is judgmental forecasting, which implies that we need a domain expert to use their own judgment and to have an educated guess about the future. Let's pretend to be these domain experts, and let's make a forecast for these shorts. So it's important to note that we have picture and we have some metadata. So we know that this is category shorts of certain color and certain number. And if you look at x-axis of this plot, we see that it is summer. We expect it to peak and then have like minimum in September. This is logical because they look summerish. And on y-axis, it is like pretty easy to get what the maximum point will be, right? It's 80, because otherwise the axis would be higher. So it looks like ground truth is as we expected. But obviously, if, for example, some of our customers have tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands groups, it would be really hard or even impossible for an expert to make these predictions. Which other options we have? Like the first, the most obvious and naive thing and pragmatic approach is to just impute missing time series. So if your model doesn't handle some cold groups, you can just impute it, right? So when I say we can impute, usually model requires some targets from the past to make a forecast. For example, to know how many sales we will have tomorrow, it's useful to know how many sales we had today, yesterday, and so on. In cold start problem, we don't have any, but we can make an educated guess and impute it with something meaningful, like average of products of same shorts, like which we observed before. And if you don't feel comfortable giving this imputation to the model, you can, of course, also inform the model with a covariate. For example, is launched. So the model knows which part is imputed and which we just took from the data. And as an example, I used XGBoost with this approach, and it looks pretty good. Also, in our experience, this is not a bad approach. It gives really good results. But some models really would require a lot of tags. So, for example, we can imagine easily a model that learns yearly seasonality by using lag from 1 year ago. And we can't just impute that much data, right? So we might think about other models. For example, we can use a model that explicitly uses seasonality. So we have the shorts. It is highly likely that in our data set we have time series for very similar products, very similar to these shorts. And it allows us to come up with some very easy models, like all-time mean of all shorts, or average time series of products with the same metadata, and they're also pretty good and competitive with XGBoost. And of course, we can also make a model that clusters products by similarity, and then it does a forecast. So in this case, we use only metadata to learn about similarity. But we could also use feature embeddings. We can use embedding of images, text description, and historical data if present. And this is exactly what has been done in this project. You see a preprint of that. So they achieved the best performance on this data set You can also follow the link to find paper, data, and everything. They didn't use any imputation. The model is encoder-decoder and uses external exogenous features, for example, Google Trend. It looks like the end of the story, but cold start problem is really full of challenges which we didn't talk about. Maybe you remember I asked Alexander, who presented out of Lyon, like, how do you treat if the time series doesn't have many steps? So we have limitation because forecasting pipeline architecture usually have some limitation because we obviously want to test our forecast, right? There is some backtesting to be done. And if you don't have full data for the window, which we use for backtesting, how do we evaluate? That's a challenge. Also, we don't want to compromise on performance on non-cold products just because we want to also forecast cold groups. So sometimes we might even think about hybrid models, where we have some sort of model dispatcher for different kinds of models. And also conceptually, it's hard to say how good we perform on cold start groups, because today we start selling shorts, they are cold because we don't have previous history, and then tomorrow they're not cold anymore. So how do we evaluate here? And also we rely a lot on the historical data. We really need to make sure that the data has a lot of similar data to products which we are going to forecast for. If this shop that we looked at before suddenly starts also selling books, like we cannot expect this model to work because what similar can we expect in our historical class? And that's it. And if you want, we can talk, or even maybe we have some time for questions, you know.